Did we enjoy that? Good, good, good. I hope you loved it as much as I did. I'm going to pick this stool right here. I think it's time to delve a little bit into more detail and speak to some of the amazing creatives we have here today to talk about the show. It is my very great pleasure to welcome to the stage executive producers Basil Iwanek and Erica Lee, action director Larnell Stovall, costume designer Sarah Arthur, and series composer Rafferty. It is, isn't it? It's very cozy. There we go. Thank you very much for coming out tonight, and I hope you have been enduring the typically seasonal British weather. It's rather nice out there.
Yeah. It's rain all day.
That's it. We get used to it 6 months of the year. So this show has had a fantastic international reception, and everyone here, I think, very much enjoyed watching it this evening. But before we get into that, what do you think about our little Continental that we've put together here? Are you feeling at home? Are you feeling in New York? Are you feeling very 70s?
It's so cool.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. No, it's a new, I mean, didn't exist 5 years ago, this way of presenting movies and publicizing it. It's really, really cool and really creative. It's awesome. I mean, we're shocked.
Talking about the experience is something new that we think is really cool and exciting.
That building, the building in New York on One Water Street, is starting tomorrow night for 3 weeks. They turn it into the Continental. You can go in there and drink, and
it's like a pop-up bar.
A pop-up bar, which is.
If you're in New York, you should get a drink.
Well, speaking of New York in the 70s, I suppose the thing I should probably ask you first of all is, what was the inspiration originally to go the prequel route, to go back to the 70s and to tell this particular story about Winston?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we had developed another version of the show for many years, which was present-day Continentals, like Continental Los Angeles, and that proved many roadblocks. It was the same timeline as the movies and kind of boxed us in, and also it didn't have Keanu, and I think people were always like, well, when's Keanu going to show up? And so we wanted to get past that, and so we sent a message to the town, agents, writers, what's a good idea? And what came back was this idea of a prequel in the 70s. And Kirk always says, he heard a line that Winston says in the earlier John Wick movies where he says, I've been running this establishment for 35 years. And that kind of keyed him in to, that's the story. What is the genesis of Winston, the Ian McShane, taking over the Continental? And so when he pitched that to us, it was like, yeah, that's it. I mean, it's fucking really smart. And we dug it.
Well, I mean, 100%. I mean, but there had to have been on your mind the idea that what is John Wick without John Wick, right?
I mean, that was
the biggest question.
Yeah, the biggest question. That was the proof of concept of the show, which is the audiences like the world enough and like the whole universe of John Wick. They could watch a John Wick show without John Wick. Thankfully, it's a prequel, so logically, doesn't make sense unless he's running around as like a 6-year-old. But that's the big buy-in. The buy-in. It's the same thing. We talk about like how Marvel must have felt after they got through Iron Man and Captain America, and they were at like Guardians of the Galaxy, like characters that no one really knew.
Yeah.
But they were betting on like, do people believe in the Marvel brand that they'll go show up even though they're not familiar with the characters? We hope that there's enough goodwill for the world and for the Ian McShane character and everything else that they'll show up even though there's no Keanu.
100%. Because, I mean, you guys, obviously very protective of this franchise, worked on the films, so you wouldn't have done something if you didn't think it could add something to the overall mythology, the sort of texture of the franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying because we didn't expect this to be a franchise.
Yeah. And
it's changed a lot of our lives, including Keanu. And we're at the point now where you're like, God, how do we not this up? And so especially when you drift off of Keanu. I mean, the great thing about Keanu Reeves as an actor and playing John Wick is when in doubt you just put your camera on him and the camera loves him and he's John in that suit and he's bruised and you feel good. It's a great safety place to go when you're doing a movie and we don't have that.
Yeah.
So we had to try a little bit harder on other things to counteract it.
And obviously the advantage you have in the movies is that Keanu is himself a formidable martial artist. Like, he takes to this stuff very well. I mean, Larnell, choreographed carnage is very much your stock in trade. And I think, as we've all seen, it's pretty impressive in this. But what were the challenges for you in sort of bringing big screen action to the small screen?
Well, one key thing I just heard was don't f- it up. So with that being said, the challenge is always they've had 4 movies to build this world. You were able to watch the action grow. But the audience expectation is we don't want to hear that. We want the action we just saw in part 4 in your first episode throughout the series. So we kind of kept that in mind and just said, hey, look, let the story reveal itself, but make memorable moments. Keep the action versatile. Let the style speak for itself because styles make good fights. It also affects how you film it and also how you design it. Albert, look, he set us up visually, aesthetically, sonically. The needle drops, the music, respecting the blueprint of John Wick, pulling back, letting the edit be in the camera. So that was an audience, even if you're not a martial artist, you basically remember what you just saw. And my job is to make sure we put some gore in there, some brutality, keep it grounded, keep it visceral. So that way, when the comparisons stop, you simply start enjoying what we're presenting and say, hey, we're the 70s. We're not as polished, but we're gritty. We're visceral. And we just let the action try to speak for itself.
And I think it very much does, especially the heist sequence. I would say in terms of pre-credit sequence, that one is a proper calling card for this season.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, leading into that, here's an example, like the stairwell sequence, now that you've seen episode 1. In a normal film, you might get 4 to 5 days to film that sequence. We filmed that in 1 day.
Wow.
There you go. But with that in mind, the audience, they won't know that. No. But what we're presenting has to be on that level or close, or at least just consistent in quality. So we just looked at it like take each sequence one at a time, do the best you can, tell a good story, and make sure there's at least 2 to 3 cool moments in there. Because you're going to forget the kicks and punches, but you won't forget the time he stabbed the guy, threw the guy's hand into the guy's chest, and shot both of them through the head. Okay, great. I'm out. Let's keep it moving. And just try to find that and stay consistent throughout the series.
Yeah. I mean, the best action sequence I find always advance the plot, but they also have a style and a grammar to themselves. So how do you go about making sure that the action sequences do feel fresh, that each one feels like a completely separate flavor?
Well, we're set up in the sense of the script, okay? The script is where everything starts. Kirk Ward, our showrunner and writer, he basically delivered cool story settings where we're able to have a playground. And within that playground, I make my notes where I sit down and think about what did I do before that hasn't been seen or hasn't been seen properly. Some things are great and hidden behind shaky camera. Some things are not revealed as well through lack of time. So our producers, Albert, he gave us the time. So I said, okay, well, we're in the kitchen. We're in an apartment. We got a baby. All right. How can we have fun with that? Oh, the baby is in danger. Oh, well, let's make bullets go near the baby. I know you're like, oh, God, they're not going to shoot a baby, because, everything started with a puppy. So we had a baby, in our sequence. So that helped us build and layer the foundation. And then I looked around the elements because once you do so many kicks and punches, you forget a good elbow, a good knee, a good roundhouse, or that she put a foot on the wall to stop the momentum because she was smaller, he was bigger. You forget that. What you don't forget is a hand in a garbage disposal. You won't forget an iron in the back of the head, because the 70s, everything was heavier, everything was tougher. So I kept that in mind with building it, that the background and the foundation of the sets became a character. So if I took that into play, it gave me more room to expand beyond just kicks and punches.
Yeah, I will never look at an eye in the same way, I can tell you that for sure. Sarah, if I can ask you a very, very, very important question from this episode. Please, can you tell us the difference between an ascot and a cravat?
Well, the British call it a cravat, and the Americans call it an ascot. But Albert was very insistent that it was called an ascot. But they are actually the same thing.
And I can pull off neither, I can tell you that. But, the 70s, I guess, are kind of a gift when it comes to costumes, right? It's a stunning era for looks, autumnal palettes, there's beautiful colours, the textures, the leather, all these different things. How did you go about bringing the 70s to this show? Because I think the costumes, everyone looks amazing in the show. And John Wick is famously a well-tailored franchise. So I'm just curious, what were your touch points for that?
Well, Albert, of course, was incredibly instrumental in the looks. He had very clear ideas, and the casting then helped my job enormously. Everyone was very enthusiastic. I brought in a lot of original costumes from the 70s. Where we had to duplicate things, we took patterns from those original costumes so that we could duplicate them. I mean, I watched Larnell's choreography very closely because I knew we had a lot ahead of us with stunts, and so that was really important. But yeah, I think, all the original pieces, we can sort of touch the 70s still. And I found some amazing one-off pieces. We used them wherever we could. Harlem, the colour came out in Harlem, the London restaurant, the New Year's Eve Studio 54 setup. So wherever I could use original pieces, I did. And then accessories, jewellery. We managed to find 90 pairs of original 70s spectacles in Budapest, can you believe? So, it's all those touches, handbags, hats, shoes that really finish off a costume.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, the practicality of it, which hadn't crossed my mind, because of course it's not just about looking good, isn't it? It's can you roundhouse kick someone in the face while wearing these trousers?
Yeah.
So you guys presumably have to collaborate on this stuff quite a bit.
We definitely did, and right at the beginning of the process, I had, I had almost 200 suits made for all Cormac's men, the exterior people, with shirts and in multiple sizes, because obviously stuntmen need paddings and, so they become 10 sizes bigger once they, depending on what they're doing. So, and of course splits and tears, and so we, not wanting to hold anything up, we had them all ready.
Amazing. I mean, is the most fun part of this the prep part of it? Because presumably you have to immerse yourself in the era, so do a lot of research. Like, what does that look like for you? Is it films? Is it going around thrift shops? How do you get into that headspace?
Yeah, so obviously again with the 70s, I mean, I had Ian Schrager's Studio 54 book and documentary available to me with extraordinary photographs. I mean, sort of the real thing. We had Alan Tannenberg in the New York in the 70s, extraordinary photographic references. Yeah. I watched other people's work on films that had been set in the 70s. I didn't want to copy those, but it was a good start, look at how other people have done it. And then we go from there. I did, as I said, huge research, lots of original pieces. I think that's really important. And all the work I do, I always try and bring in some original pieces.
We've got a lot of period people around here in the hotel at the moment, although this is Shoreditch, so sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell. But everyone does look very, very good as well. Ravity, if I can turn to you, also on the 70s thing. So the gateway, I think, to this era is partly the costumes, but it's also the soundscape, isn't it? It's the music, it's the songs, it's all of that stuff. I mean, what were your particular touchstones for the 70s for this show?
So one of the first conversations I had with Albert was avoid the 70s for the score. So he said we're going to have lots of needle drops that will set us in that period. So experiment and play with the score. I think one of the things I've heard Albert talk about a lot with the film is fun. So although the score is supposed to ground us in the seriousness of it, and it's there to mark the action and pick up on some of the emotion, it's quite sort of. It is quite sort of playful. It sort of pushes and pulls the action along, sort of how it bounces off of certain things that happen. I mean, in the later episodes particularly, I'm not going to spoil anything, but again, it comes out even more. But with the sort of absence of the 70s as a reference for the music, I then started thinking about what do I use as the inspiration point for the score. So my main inspiration was essentially to try and make a sound and score the Continental itself, so have the hotel as a character. And there are a few other little character themes. There's a Cormac theme in there, there's the theme for the brothers, but the sort of, they became affectionately known as the blares, that sort of sound. We hear that a lot around the hotel, also in the lead up to the hotel, things that kind of relate back to it. So that became kind of the touch point for for the Continental.
That's really interesting because the hotel, in many ways, is the most important character in the show, isn't it? So it has to have its own particular identity. Like, how do you get into that headspace? Is it a case of, watching the films? Is it a case of like wandering around Art Deco type installations? Like, how do you absorb all that?
Sure. Well, it's a fascinating space. I mean, I think your imagination can do most of the work in terms of, you see a bit of it when Winston's being taken through the underbelly, through the kitchen and past the incinerators, and there's just this sort of wonderful, these little back rooms that in your mind that you can kind of see as you're going through the film. So I tried to kind of put myself in the Continental, thinking about where I'm going, thinking about the rooms, and yeah, I suppose, I don't know, it's also, the whole world is a little bit off. It's sort of essentially our world, but off kilter, you know, and it's got this kind of hyper reality, sort of alternate reality thing going on. So again, it sort of gave me a bit more free rein to kind of play with the score, and some of the orchestral things that I did as well. We got those recordings back after the session, and then just sort of again playing with those, a lot of the textures come out of that, and again that sort of gives it a little bit more of that kind of organic feel.
Is it the sort of the musical aesthetic that you go for to sort of match the location, or are you thinking of the almost like the emotional payload of the music? Like, how's it going to make the viewer feel?
It's always the emotional beat that you're trying to hit, and you can do that in lots of different ways. Lots of different directors like doing it in different ways. Some are very subtle, some it's a little bit more. They want to feel it, and they want you to hit that mark. But yeah, it's always about hitting an emotional mark, and as well with the Continental, it was very much about establishing a tone, establishing an atmosphere.
Which it does very well.
Thank you.
And Erica and Basil, if I can just come back to you on one particular point, you have two characters in particular in the show who are returning characters, if not actors. And how do you go about the casting process for that? Because on the one hand, you want two strong leads in their own right, but on the other hand, you also have the legacy of Ian McShane and the late, great Lance Reddick.
I mean, it's tough because right off the bat, they have to at least vaguely look like the original actors. So you can't have Ian McShane be a 6'5", blonde hair, blue eyed. And so that shrinks it down for about maybe 15% of the pool. Then at that point, it's the kind of the essence of the character. For Ian and Colin Woodall, what I always loved about Ian McShane was his eyes.
Yeah.
Those eyes are like, they could be devilish, they could be ferocious, they could be charming. I remember when I first saw Ian, or at least impacted from in Sexy Beast, he barely spoke, but those lunches with Ray Winston was terrifying. And so for me, with Winston, it always started with the eyes, and I felt like Colin had those eyes. Now, granted, it's we got to remember this is Winston 35 years ago. He evolves or devolves into what Winston is today. But I felt like of all the actors that we met that were good actors, he was the only one that kind of captured that essence in through his eyes. And for Sharon, I'll let my colleague Erica talk about because she has the anecdote.
Because this was his first acting role, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was in drama school. I mean, we had seen a bunch of actors before, and then Sophie Holland, our UK casting director, kind of came in the last minute with this one tape. And we were like, oh, he's never acted before. He's never been anything professionally. But he just embodied everything that was special about the Sharon character. And so we took the risk, and it paid off.
And he has a naivete to him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He has an innocence to him, which works brilliantly with that character.
Yeah, I mean, which is in real life and sort of in the show, right? He'd never been on a set before. He'd never sort of, we're all of a sudden throwing him into this big TV show that's based on a movie, and he just sort of went for it. It was great.
I mean, I think it's important to stress that Ian McShane and Lance Reddick on the first John Wick movie were cast after we started shooting the movie. Ian was just a favor because we worked with him on another movie, and the way we got him in the movie was we didn't pay him anything, but we said it's New York City. You could work the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then the 2 days after Thanksgiving. We'll put you up in a suite with your wife during Thanksgiving in New York. And he said, sure. He was like 8 on the call sheet. Lance Reddick was 11 on the call sheet, 12. All he said was, the manager will see you now. I actually didn't know that was a Nigerian accent until like 2 movies ago. I thought it was like I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But they had a presence.
Yeah.
And the audience, their eyes just went to them for whatever reason. Of all the great actors in the movies, the people just always remember those two. And so there was a lot of pressure. There's a whole question about like what's a movie star, put aside, the obvious ones like, Harrison Ford or whoever. It's these actors or actresses that have this like kind of strange relationship with the audience. The audience just loves them no matter what they're doing, or they engage them emotionally.
Yeah.
And in their own way, Ian and Lance were movie stars in this world. And so that pressure of, and I'm not saying our actors are going to be movie stars, that they're well young, but they needed to have a presence because those are big shoes to fill.
Very much so. But you feel the characters resonate, I think. Like, you can definitely feel echoes of those roles. It's fantastic casting. But we do have time for a couple of questions from you guys, if you have some. If anyone would like to ask a question and wishes to raise their hand, don't be shy. Ah, yes. The gentleman with the Wi-Fi question. If this question is about the Wi-Fi, I don't know.
Hey there. Do we have Wi-Fi? No. Hi, here Enrique from Mexico. If the Continental was real, I would like to know for all of you, where you will be in, like you will be working for the Continental, you will be controlling the Continental, or you will be the one who can lead in to the Continental. I would like to know that.
I often daydream about people that I want to kill. Or at
Many
least
of them are
hurt
journalists,
badly.
I'm assuming.
So I would probably be checking into the Continental for my own safety and the safety of others.
Yeah. I think I would be a receptionist or sort of the manager because I like being the gatekeeper and sort of giving the yes or no and policing.
I think I would be the chef. Here's why. When you have good food, you love the server, you love who cooked it, and I can feed off them and get information about things happening. So, and then the idea of a chef being very dangerous with the blades and stuff like that, that might be something to think about. Yeah.
Not coming into your kitchen.
Yeah. What if the chefs were a bunch of badasses that you cut them loose and you just see this kitchenware coming at you? So, yeah, interesting.
So I'd be the doorman or the lady. You see them all coming in then?
It's a really good question. Maybe I don't know. Maybe run the Continental. Maybe. Yeah.
Go for the big job. The man at the high table. Next question. Oh, yes, over there.
Has Keanu seen the Continental yet?
Not the final version.
So we have seen it before him.
I believe he saw most of the first episode, and I would believe most of the second episode. I don't think he ever saw the third episode. The thing about Keanu is everything you hear about him is wrong. He's actually a better guy than you hear about in the press, and an incredibly generous guy. And Keanu makes it very clear, is like, that is Albert's thing, that's your thing, that's Kurt Ward's thing. He understands that if he puts his name on it, everyone's going to be like, oh, it's your thing, your thing, your thing. So he was incredibly supportive. He gave us his blessing. Of course, we went to him just out of courtesy saying, we'd like to do this. And he's like, go ahead. But he's never the guy who ever tries to take credit for anything that he does or doesn't do. If people knew how much he had to do with the conception of John Wick world, of the 4 movies, not just his character, they'd be shocked. Yeah, I mean, frankly, we sent it to, remember we were shooting John Wick 4 while we were shooting the TV show. We almost killed him in John Wick 4. And so he did not have a lot of free time. And now he's on tour with Dogstar, coming to a town near you.
Amazing. Right, we have time for one more question now. Oh, two, maybe two. We'll see. Okay, well, just for the headband, you can absolutely have one.
Oh, and my whole look.
The whole look. The whole look.
I was wondering how was working with Mel Gibson, and did he do any pranks on set? Do you know that he's known for that? Like doing pranks?
Yeah, he's legendary for that.
Yeah. Any pranks on set?
He's known for other things now, too, unfortunately. But you want to learn how you want to...
Any pranks?
Pranks.
Pranks.
Or just how he was on set.
You know what was interesting about Mel? Look, grew up watching him, so the idea of being on set with him at times could be intimidating. You know, whether you have to present something as small as, hi sir, this is what we plan on doing concerning this small action sequence, and you're never really telling him what to do. You're suggesting. But after a few moments, he's like, you know, hey kid, seem like you know what you're doing. Then he opens up, and I remember us having a conversation about the Three Stooges. And you know, just seeing that lighter side, like seeing him still be a big kid, but yet he's such a giant in the industry concerning talent, instinct, and different things. So you know, it was cool watching him in action. But then when we cut, hey Mo, you know, he'll just come back and just start clowning and saying different things. So that character you saw Riggs in Lethal Weapon, that really is him at times. You know, just you know, zany, off the cuff. But very intelligent, you know. So the few moments I had with him were really fun.
This gentleman just here.
Hi, my question is, you know, this has so much box office potential. So why a series and not a big screen film where you can make millions of dollars? Or should I presume that Amazon has already given you all that?
Correct. No, I'm kidding. No. We always wanted a TV show. If you look at the 4 movies, the first 3 movies take place over like a month. And the 4th one takes place like 6 to 9 months after the first 3. You know, John's either chasing somebody or he's being chased. We throw out a lot of ideas, but they're quick and you go through it. The beauty of like the narrative structure of television is that you have some time to dig deeper in characters, relationships, world. So we always wanted to slow it down a bit and do a TV show. But you're probably wondering, why is there 3 movies? The chairman of Lionsgate, John Feldheimer, came up with the idea of let's make it an event week, or now it's like 3 weeks. Something that was done in the 70s and 80s, where you'd have like, when I was growing up in New Jersey, it'd be like the 4:30 movie. It would be like 3 Planet of the Apes movies. And it was amazing. So he said, why don't you guys do that on the Continental? Unbeknownst to him, we were struggling with how to tell the story in 8 to 10 hours. We were just kind of really stretching the time out, which I think you see often in television now. When you watch it, go, that was 6 hours, that could have been 3. And because myself and Erica and Albert are inherently movie people, as soon as he said that, not only we think it was a cool idea to set it apart, but it kind of broke the code of what the structure of the 3 nights should look like, because there were 3 movies. So only in retrospect now does it look like we made movies. We just were stuck on how to tell the story in an extended period of time with the ins and outs of episodes. But I appreciate you thinking that. That would be, but don't worry about us financially. These guys are fine.
Thank you.
I appreciate your concern.
Amazing. Well, I think that is all we have time for this evening. The show does debut on Prime Video this Friday, so do save that date. But if everyone will give it a big round of applause for our guests who braved the British weather to be here tonight.